Lonely rancher paid her to clean his barn, but when he knocked, he found her, raising 4 kids alone. Wyoming Territory, late August of 1879. The sun hovered low behind the distant peaks, casting long shadows across the stables at Callahan Ranch, where Wade Callahan, age 38, leaned against a weathered fence post and watched her work. The woman appeared suddenly one morning, offered to clean out the stalls in exchange for a meal and a few coins. With threadbare clothing and tangled hair, she moved through the hay and muck without a word, refusing to meet his gaze or ask about her wages. By the end of her first day, Wade found her scrubbing dried blood from a recovered mare with a stoic patience that stirred something unspoken in his chest. He walked among the stalls, listening to the gentle scrape of brush on wood, wondering what life had sent her this far from anything familiar. She arrived each morning before the first light, worked until the sun sank low, then walked off the property, silent as the twilight. She carried no pack, stole glances only at her own feet, and never once thanked him. Wade wondered where she lived, how she ate, what stories lay buried behind her distant eyes, thought, "She cannot own a horse, cannot own a bed, but she talks with the dirt and the animals. A woman like that. Who knows where she comes from?" After the 5th day, curiosity outweighed hesitation. Just before noon, he watched her leave, then quietly vaulted the fence and followed at a distance. She led him down a narrow deer path through stands of lodgepole pines, the trail winding over a rocky creek bed and through forgotten clearings. Twilight caught the edges of her coat, and Wade kept his eyes fixed on her silhouette until the trees opened. There, half hidden beneath an old miner's tarp and leaning canvas, was a small, ramshackle shelter. A thin wisp of smoke curled from a crooked stovepipe, and the glow of a single lantern flickered inside. Wade froze at the edge of the clearing and thought, "She lives here, with no warmth except that tiny ember. What kind of life is that?" He almost turned to leave, respecting her privacy, but then a soft sound reached him. Children's laughter, not cries of hunger, not whimpering, but a gentle, bright peal that trembled with innocence. It was so unexpected in that remote hollow that his breath caught. He crouched behind a fallen log, peering in between planks and canvas, and his heart skipped a beat. 4 small bodies moved about the shelter, 2 boys, 2 girls, their faces thin but lit by spirit, playing quietly around a low fire. One little girl, no more than 5, chased a moth near the lantern, giggling as she swatted at the air. Evelyn stood at the center, gently lifting the girl into her arms, smoothing her hair with a tenderness Wade had never imagined in her. The girl stumbled, her bare foot hitting a hidden rock in the dirt floor. She looked up, eyes wide in surprise, and Evelyn's arms responded with warmth. She pulled the child close, kissed her head, and carried her deeper into the shelter. The other children paused and looked toward the opening. They saw something, someone new, but did not cry out. Instead, they watched her come inside, and in that glance Wade saw trust and need and fierce protectiveness. For the first time, she looked up. Her eyes, dark and wary, met his. In that raw moment, the distance between employer and servant collapsed. She had 4 lives depending on her, and whatever her past, she had built a fragile refuge from the wild. He had interrupted their safety. He had exposed them, but as he released the breath he had been holding, he realized they would never be safe alone. The timber framing shifted with a creak behind him, and he knew he stood on the edge of something that would change everything, for them all. He rose, dusting pine needles from his coat, and stepped forward. The firelight caught his profile, silent witness to a silent life. The soft murmur of children's voices and the steady glow of the lantern pulled him closer. He had asked only for work, but here he found a world he did not know he needed. One of shadows, embers, and quiet heroism. And as the little girl nestled further into Evelyn's arms, he made a decision. He would not turn away. The mornings had begun to carry frost in their breath, and Wade Callahan rose earlier now, not because the ranch needed it, but because something inside him stirred before the light did. The image of that barefoot little girl in the mist, giggling as Evelyn lifted her from the cold, would not leave his mind. The following morning, Wade rode out before the sun and left a sack of flour and a slab of salted pork hanging from the nail beside the old woodshed. He did not wait to see if she took it. He simply left it there, tucked beneath a note that read nothing more than, "For the children." That day, Evelyn arrived at the barn as she always did, silent, lean, her hair pinned back beneath a fraying bonnet. She worked with practiced hands, her eyes low, her steps soundless. When the chores were done, Wade returned to the tack room and found the sack of flour untouched. But next to it, on the workbench, lay a single silver coin and a piece of paper folded neatly. Her handwriting was small and even. "Please do not give again. I work to live. I do not beg." He read it twice, then folded it and placed it carefully in the drawer beneath the tools. He said nothing the next time they crossed paths. But the day after, he left something different, not food, not money. A hand towel, clean and new, folded and tied with twine. She took it. That was all the reply he needed. 2 days passed. Then, one quiet afternoon, Wade was checking the fence line when he heard a soft knock at the main house door. He walked around to find a boy standing there, 10, maybe 11, skin freckled, hair falling into his eyes, and a basket of eggs clutched in his hands. "You're the one who gave my mama the towel?" the boy asked. Wade leaned on the doorframe and gave a single nod. "I suppose I am." The boy hesitated, holding out the basket like an offering. "She said I should bring these, said it's not right to take and not give." Wade looked down at the eggs, 6 of them, smudged with straw and carefully packed with cloth scraps. A lump rose in his throat. "You got a name, son?" The boy nodded. "James." "Well, James, you tell your mother I said thank you. And I didn't give anything to get something back. I gave because I wanted to." James studied him for a moment, like he was trying to decide if Wade meant it. Then he nodded again and turned to go. That night, Wade sat by the fire longer than usual, staring into the flickering orange and thinking not of the ranch, but of 4 children huddled together under a leaky roof, and the woman who held it all together with silence and stitches. The next morning, he found a strip of old muslin cloth tied to the fence post by the barn. On it, embroidered in small, careful letters, were 4 names: James, Clara, Lily, and Sam. He didn't untie it. He just stood there, holding the post, letting the cold wind lift his coat, and whispered to no one, "Well, now I know who I'm working for." After that, Evelyn didn't leave coins anymore. But she still said nothing, and Wade didn't push. Some days she left behind a few wild berries in a jar, other days a half-stitched sock, or a child's drawing made from charcoal and flour paper. Simple things, but they landed heavy in Wade's chest. He couldn't explain it, but something in her quiet pride reminded him of an old tree growing through stone, bent but not broken, silent but deeply rooted. He didn't know her past, didn't need to, but he knew one thing for certain. A woman raising 4 children alone in a crumbling shelter shouldn't have to walk that road without someone walking beside her. Even if he had to walk at a distance, Wade was already on that trail. Under a sky dark as rusted iron, clouds clamped tight around the mountains like clenched fists, warning of the hailstorm that loomed. Wade stood on the porch of the horse barn, coiling rope with steady hands, but his eyes stayed fixed on the trail that disappeared into the woods. Something in his gut twisted, an instinct he could not shake. For weeks now he had been reinforcing the barn, replacing rotted boards, fixing hinges, patching the roof. Evelyn never asked for it. She said nothing when she noticed the repairs, just kept scrubbing the stalls and sweeping the feed aisle like before. But Wade noticed the small things. How she ran her fingers across the smooth new planks, how she paused when she saw the hook he'd nailed near the door just for her coat. Every time he tried to slip her a little more money, the next morning he would find a note on the table, written in the same small, careful hand. "You've done enough. Don't carry what's not yours." Wade never argued. He just folded the notes and placed them in the top drawer of his desk where they joined the growing stack, a silent ledger of refusal and pride. That afternoon, the hail came. It pelted the ground with a fury that rattled the barn roof and sent horses shifting nervously in their stalls. Wade did not wait. He threw on his thickest coat, pulled his hat low, and saddled the horse without a word. The path was mud-slick and treacherous, but he rode hard, his jaw set. When he reached the clearing, the sight made his chest go still. The tarp roof had caved in on one side, a canvas wing torn and flapping uselessly in the wind. Smoke no longer drifted from the pipe chimney. One of the shutters had broken loose and swung wildly in the storm, slapping wood like a warning. Wade dismounted and pushed open the makeshift door. Inside, the cold hit first. Then he saw them, 4 children, curled together like pups beneath threadbare quilts. The smallest, a girl no older than 3, whimpered softly but did not cry. Beside them, Evelyn sat slumped against the wall, blood smeared at her temple from a falling beam, her arms still spread as if to shield them from everything the world could throw. "Evelyn," Wade said, voice low, steady. She blinked slowly. Her eyes tried to focus, but she did not speak. Wade didn't wait for permission. He knelt and gathered the smallest child into one arm, then reached for another. "We're going," he said. "All of you." The 2 oldest helped each other up, quiet and stunned. Wade shifted his weight, cradled the baby tighter, then looked at Evelyn again. "Come on." She hesitated, then rose shakily, blood matting her hair. She didn't argue, didn't ask where, just followed. Back at the ranch, Wade opened the door wide. The fire in the main cabin roared to life, warm and steady. He didn't say a word, just gestured toward the hearth. The children drifted in, eyes round, feet dragging. Wade set the youngest down gently on the old rug, then stepped into the kitchen. He returned with a tin cup of milk, warm from the stove. The little girl, her cheeks red from cold, her hair sticking to her forehead, looked up at him. Wade knelt, held out the cup without a word. She reached for it with both hands. Behind her, Evelyn stood, still as stone, soaked and shivering, watching him with a gaze that said everything she couldn't find the words for. And Wade, who had lived 10 winters in that cabin without company, without laughter, without even a voice at the table, realized something quiet but deep. This wasn't charity. This wasn't obligation. This was the first time that place had felt like it was waiting for someone to come home. Dawn's first light crept through gaps in the cabin walls, pale and relentless, illuminating dust motes in the air. Evelyn stirred, head pounding from the cold, flashes of last night's rescue coming back, hail pounding the rickety roof, a beam collapsing, the children curled under blankets, Wade's quiet authority. She sat up, muscles stiff, and saw the children huddled together under a single quilt. Holding her breath, she feared waking them, and feared staying. Morning stretched its fingers across the room as Evelyn moved silently to the wooden crate that served as her trunk. She began stuffing cloth scraps, a few coins, and the bundle of handwritten notes she'd kept, updates for Wade that said more than she ever could. Tucking in a towel he'd left a week ago, she tied it tight, tears wetting her fingers. She did not want to burden him. Not again. At the back door, frost crusted the threshold. Evelyn paused before stepping into the chill. Clutching her bundle, she faced Wade, who stood motionless in the doorway, the children asleep behind him. His silence felt like a wall. Finally, her voice broke the stillness, hushed and brittle. "I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan, but I can't." Eyes dropped. "You've done too much already. If I stay, people will talk. You're a landowner, a good one, but folks notice things." She swallowed hard. "They'll say I'm taking advantage, that I'm dragging you into disgrace. I won't let that happen to you." Tears glistened in her eyes. A loose board creaked behind Wade. Neither moved. Then he stepped forward, shoulders steadying. "Evelyn," he said calmly, "I've lived out here 15 years. I've heard what folks think. I've gotten used to their rumors. But I've never had soup warmed after a long day, never had someone care enough to wipe my shoulder when the cold set in." He paused, pain crossing his features. "You think I don't see something's changed? I do. You think I don't notice the way the kids trust you? I do." He reached out and gently took her cold fingers. "They need you," he said simply, "not because you're running, but because you give them some place to run to." Evelyn looked at his hand, steady, warm. She pressed her palm to his, voice trembling. "I'm tired, so tired of hiding. Tired of being afraid every time someone knocks." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I don't want to bring those fears here. The kids deserve peace, and I'm not sure I can give it." Wade closed his hand over hers, lacing their fingers together. "Then stay," he replied, voice deeper. "Stay for them. Stay because here you don't have to run. Not with me. Not with them." He opened the door wide, gesture simple yet profound. "They're asleep now, but when they wake, they need someone who stays. Someone who doesn't vanish when things get hard." For a moment she simply breathed. The children stirred, soft sighs and shifting limbs. Evelyn mourned her solitary past, roads, cold nights, silence, but these four needed her. And he did too. This felt like belonging, not charity. Tears dripped from her chin as she spoke, voice small but clear. "All right, I'll stay." She pressed her hand to her chest. "I'll stay. For them, and for you." She flinched at the admission. He closed the distance, brushing a lock of hair from her neck. Wade nodded, eyes soft. "Then let's start again," he said, reaching for her bundle. "One day at a time." She let him take it, lips trembling into a fragile smile. The cabin door closed behind her fingertips as they stepped inside, the children asleep, unaware of the decision that would shape their future. The silence that followed felt different, not empty, but whole. Evelyn moved to the hearth and stoked dying embers, expecting him to leave. But he stayed, brushing sawdust from his trousers. He knelt beside her, pulling the quilt tighter around the youngest child, giving Evelyn room to breathe again. She hesitated, heart hammering, then reached out, her free hand finding his. They sat together in the glowing hearthlight, quiet and determined, watching the fire take hold of dry wood. Outside, wind howled, but inside, something stronger was rising. Evelyn closed her eyes, exhaled. She would stay, not out of promise or duty, but because she no longer feared what might follow. Here, darkness met light. Here she belonged. Dusk had turned the skies into a smear of bruised purple and fading gold when the sound of hooves broke the quiet. Wade stepped out from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag, eyes narrowing at the silhouettes approaching from the edge of the trail. 3 men on horseback. One rode with slouched arrogance, a smirk almost visible from yards away. Wade recognized him before he could even dismount. The man swung down with too much confidence, boot heels hitting the dirt like gunshots. His hat hung low over greasy hair, but nothing could disguise the swagger. Cal Rourke, Evelyn's husband in name, nothing more. "Even in, Callahan?" Cal drawled. "Heard you been sheltering what used to be mine." Wade's voice was steady. "She's not yours, and she's not property." Cal shrugged. "Didn't come for her. Hell, I don't want the woman. She's too broke to be useful. But those kids?" He grinned with cracked teeth. 4 of 'em. That's money I could use. $100 apiece. You give me that, I'll be out of your hair." Behind him, the 2 men, hired shadows, broad-chested and empty-eyed, watched silently. Wade stepped off the porch, slow and deliberate. "You come here with threats and a price tag on children? You won't leave the same." Cal chuckled and pulled a folded paper from his coat. "Got birth certificates," he said. "Got names. You don't have any of that. She ran, remember? No court paper, no proof, just words. You give me the money, I disappear, or the law takes him back." Wade's jaw clenched. "There's no law in this county that protects a man like you." "You sure about that?" Cal asked, his voice slick. "I could walk into town right now and claim every damn kid she's hiding in your house. What'll you do then, huh?" From the porch, Evelyn appeared. She didn't scream, didn't plead. She stood with her fists clenched and her shoulders squared. "They'll never give them to you," she said, voice low. Not even if I have to hide forever." Cal sneered. "You think hiding behind a broken rancher makes you safe? Come on, darlin', it's $100. That's cheap for 4 mouths." Wade stepped between them. "That's enough." And then the first punch came. One of the men lunged at Wade, catching him hard across the jaw. The second followed, and Wade fell backward into the dirt. Evelyn screamed, rushing forward, but Cal grabbed her wrist and shoved her down. "You think I won't take him right now?" he snarled. Before the second blow landed, a gunshot rang out. "Let her go, Cal." The voice came from behind the fence. Jed Weaver, a neighboring rancher, stood with a rifle raised, his wife beside him, revolver in her hands. They had come just in time, eyes burning with fury. "This ain't your business, Jed," Cal growled. Jed cocked the rifle. "It is now." The 2 thugs backed away first. One muttered something and turned his horse. The other followed, and Cal cursed, realizing he was alone. "You'll regret this," he spat. "No," Jed said. "You will." Cal mounted and galloped off, dust and rage trailing behind him. Silence returned, broken only by Wade's labored breathing. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside him, her hands cradling his face. "You're bleeding," she whispered. He managed a crooked smile. "That's what happens when you fight bastards." "You should have stayed back," she said, tears brimming. "This wasn't your burden." He looked up at her, bruised but calm. "If it's not for you, then who the hell is it for?" She pressed her forehead to his. "You didn't have to." "Yes, I did." Behind them, the children peeked through the window, wide-eyed and silent. Evelyn looked at them, then back at Wade. "They'll never forget this," she whispered. "Neither will I," he said. And in the dying light, with blood in the dust and fire in her chest, Evelyn knew. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was home. The courtroom felt too bright, too clean, worlds away from the dusty land where Evelyn had carved out a life with grit and silent prayers. He stood in a plain dress, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles paled. Behind her, her children sat like shadows. Wade stood off to the side, arms crossed, jaw set. Across the aisle, Cal Rourke lounged with a smirk, confident. The judge shuffled papers. "Mrs. Rourke, do you have documentation of custody?" Evelyn's voice cracked. "No, sir. He never let me sign anything. No school papers, no doctor forms. I just kept them alive." Cal leaned forward. "She kidnapped them. Ran like a thief. I've got their birth records. My name's on every one. She's been hiding them." "She protected them," Wade interjected. "Let's keep it civil," the judge warned. Evelyn took a breath. "I didn't run to hide. I ran because he hurt me, because I couldn't let my children grow up afraid of every slammed door." But her words seemed small in that cold room. Law wanted ink and signatures, not bruises and fear. The judge sighed. Without supporting documents or witness. A chair scraped. A frail voice broke in. "I'll testify." Everyone turned. An old woman stood, steadying herself on a cane. "Esther Whitlock. I've lived in Wren Hollow 62 years. I saw what happened." The judge nodded. Esther pointed to Cal. "That man came to my ridge. Told her he didn't want her, just money. Said the kids were worth more separate. Called her a hole that dried up. I heard it. She didn't know I was there. But I was." The room fell silent. The judge looked at Evelyn, then at the papers again. His voice was firm. "This court grants full guardianship of the children to Evelyn Rourke, effective immediately." Evelyn exhaled like it was her first breath in years. Behind her, Nathan squeezed Clara's hand. Lissa blinked fast. Wade didn't smile, but he nodded once. It was over. Or so they thought. They arrived home at sundown, the wagon crunching over gravel. All looked quiet, too quiet. Then they saw the coop. Smashed, torn apart, feathers scattered across the dirt, chickens gone. And on the barn door 3 words scrawled in soot. "You lose." Wade stared, silent, then turned and headed for the stable. "Where you going?" Evelyn asked. He met her gaze, fire in his eyes. To do what I should have done weeks ago." She did not stop him. That night, while the children slept curled in one bed, Evelyn sat on the porch, wrapped in Wade's coat, waiting. Stars blinked above. The wind held its breath. Then hooves approached. Wade dismounted, dust clinging to him. "They got him," he said. "Lincoln County. Sheriff's holding him for attempted extortion, trespassing, maybe more." Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth, blinking hard. Wade stepped closer. "It's over." She looked to the sky. "No," she whispered. "It's beginning." He nodded. And together, they stepped inside, not into fear, but into something they could finally call home. The morning sun spilled gold over the pasture, the kind of light that made everything feel just a little more possible. Wade stood beside Evelyn and the children as they worked on rebuilding the chicken coop. The old one had been torn apart, but the bones of something sturdier now rose in its place. The kids passed nails, held boards steady, and chased each other with the kind of joy that only returned when fear loosened its grip. Lisa, the eldest, checked the level of the roosting bar with the seriousness of a seasoned carpenter. Nathan took pride in hammering every nail straight. Tommy hummed softly, brushing off dirt with the back of his sleeve, and little Anna, barefoot and smudged with flour from breakfast, sat in the grass, pretending to feed invisible hens. The wind carried the smell of cedar shavings and something softer. Peace. As Wade adjusted the door hinges, Anna padded over and tugged at Evelyn's apron. "Mama," she whispered, her voice small and hopeful, "can we stay here forever?" Evelyn's hand stilled on the coop frame. She looked toward Wade, who was wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his glove. She hesitated, then said gently, "That depends. If Mr. Wade's okay with us making a home of this place." Wade turned, eyebrows lifted in mock surprise. "If I'm okay with it?" He looked at the children, then back at her. "From now on, this place belongs to all of us." Nathan let out a breath like he'd been holding it for weeks. Lissa smiled without looking up from her hammer. Evelyn's shoulders dropped, and in that moment, something inside her began to unfold. Later that evening, the co-op finally stood complete. The children scattered toward the porch, tired but beaming, their laughter lingering in the twilight. Evelyn stayed behind, brushing sawdust from her skirt. Wade stood beside her, arms crossed, watching the sun slip behind the ridge. She did not speak at first, just stood in the quiet, letting it settle around her like something earned. Then she reached for his hand, gently placing hers on top of it. He didn't move, just looked down at her fingers, strong, scarred, unshaking. "I know I've been here a while," she said softly, "but I still feel like I'm borrowing this life." "You're not borrowing anything," he said. "You've built it." Evelyn's voice caught slightly. If it's all right, I'd like to stop knocking, stop feeling like I'm just passing through." Wade turned to face her fully. "I want the children to have something that's real," she continued. "A name that means safety, not shame." Wade's eyes never left hers. "If it's all right," she said, quieter now, "I'd like to carry your name. Not because I have to, but because I want to. I'd like to be Evelyn Callahan." The wind stirred again, brushing loose strands of hair from her face. Wade didn't answer with words. He just lifted her hand, pressed it to his chest, and nodded. Then he leaned close, not to kiss her, not yet, but to rest his forehead against hers. A quiet promise. And that night, as the lantern flickered low and the fire crackled in the hearth, Wade sat at the table with the children gathered around, each drawing on scrap paper, making plans for a garden come spring. Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching her family. Not borrowed, not temporary, not running. Oh, and she did not need to knock any more. The years passed slowly and sweetly, like honey warmed in the sun. The Callahan Ranch, once a place of silence and dust, grew into something no one had quite imagined. The coop stayed full, the barn rebuilt twice, and laughter became part of the land's rhythm. But it was not just chickens or horses that filled the space. It was children. Orphans left at church doors, little ones passed from wagon to wagon until someone said, "Ask Evelyn, she'll take them." And she always did. One by one she brought them home, sometimes in blankets, sometimes in silence, always with arms wide open. By the time Wade turned 60, there were 10 children under that roof, 4 that came from Evelyn's past, 6 from the broken corners of other lives. They called her Ma and Mama Evie, and sometimes just home. Wade, slower now but still strong, sat on the front porch each evening with a pipe in hand and the porch light glowing low. He watched the children run barefoot in the twilight, watched Evelyn sit cross-legged on the rug just inside, her voice steady as she taught them to read from a Bible missing half its cover and a stack of old-school primers. His favorite was when they got to the word belong. Every time, Evelyn would pause, tap the word gently with her finger, and ask, "Who does this word remind you of?" And little Clara, now nearly grown, would always say, "Us." One night, Wade leaned back in his chair, his bones tired but his heart still restless. "If I hadn't opened the door that day," he said, voice low, "I would have never known what it meant to have a real family." Evelyn looked up from the circle of children, her gray hair pinned back, her eyes soft. "If you hadn't knocked," she replied, "I might have thought I was meant to live hiding forever." She stood, walked out to the porch, and sat beside him. Her hand found his as naturally as breath. "You remember the first thing you gave me?" she asked. Wade chuckled. "A clean rag and a bad joke." She smiled. "It was a place to stand still." They sat like that as the stars blinked into the sky, each one like a memory returning home. Inside, Nathan, now nearly a man, tended the fire. Lissa braided a smaller girl's hair. Tommy had grown into his boots and whittled wood with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the rhythm of safety. Anna helped the younger ones brush their teeth, tucking them in like she'd once been tucked herself. And above the front door, carved into a plank of oak by Wade's own hand, hung a sign. No nails, no hinges, just words. This land raised more than crops, it raised hearts. Strangers stopped to read it, travelers paused, some knocked, most didn't need to. The Callahan Ranch became something whispered about in nearby towns, not just for its horses, or the rows of corn that now lined its southern field, but because of what it became, a place where no one had to knock more than once, a place where you were met not with suspicion, but with soup, a place where Evelyn Callahan and the man who once hired her to clean his barn taught a generation how to grow love from ruin. And on the nights when the wind blew strong and the world felt too wide, the door stayed open just a little longer. Not for fear, but for welcome. Because some doors, once opened, should never be closed again. If this story stirred something in your heart, if you felt the weight of silence, the grace of second chances, or the warmth of a home built from nothing but love, then saddle up and stay a while longer. At Wild West Love Stories, we bring you tales not just of frontier grit, but of human grit, where barns become sanctuaries, strangers become family, and love grows even where the land is rough and unforgiving. Subscribe to our channel for more cinematic, emotional, and unforgettable stories from the untamed heart of the American West. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a journey into love that defies the dust, the danger, and the past. Because out here, the wild does not break the heart, it shows you how to heal it. This is Wild West Love Stories, where every ending leaves an echo.